exclusive provider for Uber and the Uber and ASU education program as they rolled out a new set of rewards for their drivers. And that rolled out in 8 locales. So we can plug in a few bits of information on that brand new, literally 1 day old announcement. But we have a lot more history with Starbucks, and I think maybe Lisa could help answer some of those questions first before she has to go catch a flight. I don't remember where you're going.
Oh, I actually am not going anymore.
Oh, there's more time then.
I was planning to go to Denver. So yeah, I can start with the Starbucks partnership. Our president, President Crow, likes to tell a good story that he was basically at a board retreat with Howard Schultz, with whom he is a colleague professionally, and they were both talking in the at this board retreat, and essentially both agreed that, you know, Howard, who was a visionary, obviously, for Starbucks, and Starbucks sort of pioneered offering health insurance to their partners for part-time work in the 80s. And, you know, if you're a partner at Starbucks, why they call them partners is because they're all shareholders. They have the ability to take part in the stock program, and that's really why they changed their name from employees to partners, because they are essentially partners of the company. So this is sort of on those same lines, but as you know, ASU has a very well-known scalable online education platform, which we'll go into. But because we have that asset readily available, which obviously Howard knew, the two of them collaborated and said, you know, we have this huge population of baristas without a bachelor's degree, and certainly this, you know, spans all across the U.S., not just within, you know, the Seattle area or Arizona. And so they really just got together and said, well, you know, we are the education providers. We can scale that to the population of people that are seeking that. And so that's how the Starbucks College Achievement Plan was essentially born. This was back in late 2013. And by fall of 2014, we had launched. So that was well before I was part of the program, probably even before Leah was part of the program. We had a lot of people working to figure out how to do this. And at first we started with just people who wanted to finish their degree. So people who were transferring in credits at the junior and senior level. So, you know, they had started somewhere, you know, like many people's stories, as you all know as well, people start somewhere, dropped out, didn't finish because life got in the way for one reason or another. So that was the initial focus, was just the people to complete their degree. And shortly after, we recognized that really we should span that out to everyone, you know, who wanted to even start. So it's from a freshman, if you have, you know, no credits to transfer in, to people with maybe just 1 or 2, and then we offer it up to 135 credits. So typically the average 4-year degree is around, you know, 120 to 125 credit hours. Some people change their mind and switch their major, so we just have kind of a flat max 135 credit hours. So that's really how the program began, and we've continued to iterate from there, just based on partner feedback and things that we've learned along the way. And I think, you know, that's sort of one of the things that I think is really great, is that it wasn't just something that started and we got it perfect. We had to continue to work with Starbucks. We have a really close partnership and relationship with them that helps us with those types of dialogues to iterate along the way. Is there a question?
No, sorry.
Okay. So let me just pause there. Any questions on really sort of how we got it started? I can go into a little bit more details in terms of where we are today. But that's really how this came to be, was really the minds of President Crow and Howard Schultz coming together, and then the teams here and at their headquarters operationalizing it.
I just have a question. Do you accept PLA credits? Do you do PLA credits for any of this? Or is it just you're just transferring in credits from other college courses some of them may have taken?
PLA is like continuing education.
No, prior learning assessment.
No.
No, okay.
So we keep the same educational standards that anyone that would want to apply to ASU. So they have the ability to go to any major. So we have over 80 undergrad majors that are available to them. So it's really the same admission standards, the same access to to the same degree programs that we offer for our non-Starbucks students as well.
And how many Starbucks employees do you have taking advantage of this program?
So right now, so we use a number collectively with Starbucks that's called participating. And that's if they were enrolled either 2 sessions back or are enrolled in a future session. And that number right now is about 11,000. Currently enrolled in our fall enrollment session, we have just around 8,000 in our undergrad program. We also launched something a little over a year ago called Pathway to Admission. And this is really another innovation that we made is, let's say, you don't have the right level of GPA to get admitted to ASU, or, you didn't do so well in algebra or one of your, entry-level courses. We give them the ability to take a course, and essentially it erases some of their past mistakes that makes them then admissible to ASU. So we have over 700 students also enrolled in that program as well. And we've admitted over 100 into ASU as a result of that program. So that's something that we piloted last year. We're really excited about that because, again, that helps remove the barriers for not just partners at Starbucks, but outside of that, where people who would not have been able to get in, another way by which they can get into school. So all told, we're really comfortable now with that kind of 10,000 marker. It just depends on, summer it's a little bit lower, but our fall and spring, we're really at a nice tipping point. We will, by the end of this year, graduate over 2,500 SCAP scholars as part of the program.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's really good.
And are the Starbucks employees, are they, is there any payroll deductions or anything that they're putting into the pot, or is Starbucks covering the entire tuition for them? And if so, is it capped per year on how many classes they can take with you?
So they pay for the tuition. What's not paid for is their program and fees. So that would be the responsibility of the partner. So of course they can, most of them are eligible for grants or Pell Grants and whatnot. So you sort of have this beginning level, we have a scholarship, and then whatever is not covered by their Pell Grants and whatnot, then Starbucks covers the balance of their tuition for that. And it's reimbursed after they take the course. So oftentimes they'll take out loans or anything to cover to kind of help float that money from a cash flow perspective. And then we reimburse them. There's kind of 3 points in time a year where we do that exchange, where Starbucks does that exchange. And then what also is great about what Starbucks is doing is it's a no strings attached program. So once I graduate with my bachelor's degree, if I find a job, really in the area where I want to go and work, I don't have a time frame that I have to remain working at Starbucks for any period of time, which in a normal tuition reimbursement environment, that's typically usually the requirement of employers, but Starbucks does not have that requirement. The other thing too is it's not required for them to take a particular course or degree program that would be applicable to the area where they're working. So it doesn't have to be like a retail degree. If they're interested in digital photography or supply chain management or English or whatever it is, they can take what's interesting to them versus what would necessarily be, interesting for Starbucks in terms of getting them progressed within the organization.
Student centered.
Yes,
Really student centered.
fantastic.
An interesting fact too is about 50% of those who have graduated have stayed with Starbucks and 50% have left. So we are also working collectively with Starbucks as well as ASU's Career and Professional Development Group to help those that have career plans outside of Starbucks to help them, find avenues to do that. So we're trying to help the alumni group there as well and keep them nurtured, help them find their way. It's not just about, once they finish their degree, they're done. They're treated like, we do with many of our, you know, all of our alumni to do that. The other piece too is, of course, what Starbucks is wanting to do is find pathways for growth within their organization as they can as well. So we kind of have this dual way of trying to help those who have finished their degree find their way in career progression as well.
And what are some of the more popular majors or courses that are being taken by Starbucks employees?
Yeah, so usually organizational leadership, a lot of interdisciplinary study type ones, psychology, those tend to be the higher ones. We're starting to see more interest in other areas. Starbucks is also interested in growing their tech field. So we may start to continue to see that in the future as well, because they want to better communicate roles in their tech function. And we obviously have tech-related roles or degree programs that are available online. So right now, that is the way sort of it falls. But you know, we're excited to offer different things so that it can shift in the future, depending on also how Starbucks wants to shape this for their career path that they can offer internally.
Okay, are there any questions online from our online participants or anybody at Butler?
Yeah, do you just offer the undergrad degree for the partners?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we do, and it's a first bachelor's. So if I have my bachelor's in psychology and I wanted to go back and get my bachelor's in business, I'm not covered under the program, so it really has to be someone's first bachelor's. We get the question about master's a lot, but at this point in time, it's a first bachelor's degree that we offer.
I have a personal connection. I have a cousin who's part of your program. He just moved from Arizona to New York City, so.
And your cousin is still in the program? Did they move while they were in the program?
He was in the program. I think he graduated from ASU, so he's now, I think he's training for the roastery.
Oh yeah, it's opening in New York.
He's pursuing dance in New York City, but he's also doing that.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's nice to hear the personal connections, and I try whenever I go to a Starbucks, ask if there's an SCAP scholar in there, just kind of talk personally to them and get their input. But usually they light up when you ask them because they're so excited about the program and what it's doing for them and helping empower them. So yeah, we're really proud of it.
All right, and just a couple follow-up questions with the size of the online operation. How many people you have working? I guess there's the online campus. A lot of us here, we either call ourselves online campuses within a community college or online departments. So can you give us a little scope on how many students you serve? Are they within the U.S.? Do you have international students? And how many people help run your operation?
Are you talking at the Starbucks level or all of ASU online?
Well, perhaps both. If you want to just talk maybe about the Starbucks initiative now, and maybe with your new deal with Uber, how you're gearing up to make sure that you've got the proper support and everything in place to assume, what I'm guessing is several hundred, if not several thousand new students.
So we have a partnership with Starbucks. In addition to the SCAP program, which is how it started, we have other partnership extensions that have happened as a result. So I have a team of about 8 or 9 people. Some of them work on the SCAP program, others work on other partnership extensions of that. But what we also try to do too is, these are students, online students, just like the rest of our online programs. So they're sort of embedded in our operations here. We obviously look at the numbers different, but in terms of, the way that we manage that population, it's part of the overall way that we manage ASU online. And certainly Starbucks, and this is a really important piece of this, Starbucks has a dedicated team to this program as well. So they have a director that oversees it. That person sits in their partner resource, so similar to an HR function, because of the benefit there. But they are responsible for the marketing for it, So if you think of ASU kind of supporting it and operationalizing it, you also have people on the Starbucks side doing that as well. So it's sort of this kind of dual run operation, which obviously necessitates, you know, the constant communication and iterating the program and getting together to talk about, you know, how we're doing, how we can do better together, and how we can continue to improve. And in terms of answering your question, yes, they're all contained within the US. We are actually doing a pilot in the UK that will happen next year. So we're just sort of starting to put some of those pieces together. The benefit covers Starbucks company-owned stores. So some of, like if you go to Target or like a Kroger grocery store, they are all, you know, you see the different Starbucks in there. Those are licensed stores, which are not company-owned. So they're not part of the benefit. So it's just the Starbucks company-owned stores that are covered under the benefit. But they do have company-owned stores globally, and hence my comment about we're doing a pilot next year in the UK. Certainly new for us. You know, it's different because ASU is not known, you know, as well outside of the US. So just a lot of experimenting that we'll have to do there. So the majority of, you know, obviously the students are coming from the US.
But maybe we can expand that. What is ASU's online presence outside of the Starbucks initiative in outside of the U.S.? That makes sense? Yeah.
Starbucks outside the US.
So outside, like you said, you're just moving it with the Starbucks, you're just going to pilot in the UK. But what does ASU have a lot of international students on its own outside of that Starbucks initiative? So you've already got a lot of that, the practices in place, you know, making sure you're up with the GDPR and things like that. It's not all going to come fall on you with your Starbucks initiative. Like that, you've already covered that through ASU Online.
Yeah, we've been advancing in the international space quite a bit. By not doing anything, we ended up like 700 international students.
Okay.
Being in Canada or expats. But we also have very targeted initiatives that we've been working with other foundations. So I think that's something about ASU and what you see in terms of a public-facing ASU Online. ASU, it has a lot of partnerships across the world to deliver very customized approaches to things. So something like Starbucks is very visible, but we also do a scholarship program with a foundation out of the Middle East called Al Ghurair Foundation for Education, where they're trying to offer 550 masters at 100% scholarship to extremely low income students across 22 Arab countries. They came to us because our master's programs are online and they can't get quality masters necessarily in the region. And if they do, they're all taught by expats anyway. So, but that has taught us a lot. So one thing is, you know, the authorization or accreditation, depending on where you're at, we call it something slightly different. You know, moving online in general, you do have to be authorized by all 50 states within the US, plus DC. So technically we went through 51 separate authorizations. We're part of a group called SARA that helps streamline it for a number of states, but when we started, there weren't that many states that were part of SARA. Now it's much easier, so.
Yes. Yeah. 12 of the 14 of us are SARA members, so up to date with that, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately 9 years ago, not as many people were. But yeah, that's where we're at with the international, but you'd be shocked at how many countries actually have no authorizing or accreditation body over online education. They're just now building it. So what we find ourselves is oftentimes consulting. So for example, in the UAE, we are the first online set of programs that got authorized through one of the local authorizing bodies known as Knowledge Human Development Authority within Dubai. So we started there because they were one of the only bodies doing anything, but now the ministry within the UAE is interested. So again, we just find ourselves providing people guidance on how to do it, to go into that space. And then other regions of the world like China and stuff, you pretty much have to go through agents to bring students to ASU, but we haven't really branched out in our online programs there for a variety of reasons. Very expensive. I mean, the main reason probably.
I had a quick question. I read something about your Global Freshman Academy, and that I guess students can take the courses if they get, and I may be wrong on this because it was a while, but if they get a C or better, they can then pay, like, I guess that's free, and then they can pay for it to get the credit if they want to transfer. Is that correct? And can
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of a deck to share some things with you guys. We can cover that specifically. That we had a list of questions you had. It addresses a number of them. Maybe this would be a good time for me to bring that deck up, and then I can explain Global Freshman Academy Earned Admission Pathway to Admission, which is the Starbucks name. It's all the same thing under many different names. Would that be an okay time to start that?
Yeah, if you're okay with that. Do you want to take control of the hosting of the session, or?
Yeah, if you can make me presenter, that'd be great.
Okay, all right, 1 second, please.
Maybe if you go down to manage participant, Alex.
Can you see anything?
Yep, yeah, we see your, looks like slides or PDFs.
Excellent, okay. So just, you had a lot of questions in general about how we got started and how we've grown and everything else. So to explain it, Ed Plus is actually an umbrella organization over all the digital learning and teaching opportunities to advance higher education at scale. And so we're part, obviously, of ASU, and sometimes when departments get created, they lose the fact that they're a part, but we are ASU. We all live and breathe this charter. So most of us could state it, at least portions of it by heart. That's been a big part of, I think, ASU's success. And President Crow's been here for 16 years now, and he has been unwavering in his goals. In fact, his appetite has been insatiable. So as we were set up, we are considered a central enterprise unit for ASU, where we focus on serving faculty and students to increase access. And the areas that are under us are things like relationships for online degree programs and online learning, like Starbucks. The open scale stuff, which is what we now call the Global Freshman Academy, because we not only offer the freshman level or lower division level credits on edX, we also have a degree on Coursera and a lot of other things within the open scale platforms. And then online continuing education, which is an area that continues to grow for us. ASU likes to look at ourselves as being there for the universal learner. Everyone is in it to learn for life. And so we believe that anyone who's looking to learn anything, we should be able to provide the solution for them. And we are a little bit crazy. And then Tom, I know you had some questions about Action Lab. That's what we call our deep learning analytics. And so we're going to give him some time here at the end of this presentation and go from there. So pathways for success through social innovation. How we got started, President Crow always said, if we can serve one student on a campus, we should be able to serve one student online. So the goal has always been for us to serve 100,000 learners online, because the goal is to serve 100,000 degree seekers on campuses. But that's because there's an insatiable appetite for education. From 2015 to 2025, the thought was that it would grow from 160 million to 410 million. So from a physical perspective, that would mean you'd have to build 40 universities that are approximately the size of ASU, which, by the way, for us to serve 80,000 students, we're spread across 4 campuses in the Metro Valley area. And we'd have to build those 4 every week, every year for 15 years. There's no physical way, and we actually are sitting in the middle of a boon in South Scottsdale, close to the Tempe campus here. And we have 3 buildings going on around us, and they take over a year. So there's no way this is physically possible. Then you have to populate them with teachers. So it's about scale. We believe that's the answer. We believe in a strong culture. So if you ever came to visit, we have a pretty cool space up here. Again, I mentioned we serve the university. We focus on solving problems, a sense of urgency. These are things, again, to survive in the digital space. We don't get to see our students. So that is a natural motivating factor when you're on a campus, is you get to see the students. We don't see them. So we have to make sure that we create the kind of culture that makes sure that we are going after the population we're trying to serve. You know, we don't want it to be out of sight, out of mind. Who we've served, about 38,000 students right now are actively engaged with us. You know, some students take a planned session off or not. And then we've served over 81,000 students in degree seeking programs. Lisa mentioned, you know, we update these decks, by the way, every couple months, and they get outdated in a second. So we've had 1,700 SCAP graduates, but between December and May, we will pass 2,500. SCAP is the Starbucks College Achievement Plan. I know you all have your own acronyms that you deal with every day. We're sorry if they snuck into our presentation. And then the open skill programming, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Speed and scale. I've talked about our goals of 100,000 learners. But I think what's good about this is it helps break down in different ways we plan on achieving those goals. So this is kind of the base. Like if we didn't do anything, this is how we would grow. Things like these academic partnerships in the green. Those are like articulation agreements with community colleges. We have a lot of students from California who come to ASU. We plan on expanding that, and that would be something we want to talk to you guys about. But also the corporate partnerships like Starbucks and now Uber will continue to grow. And then different kinds of marketing or partnerships will be another huge opportunity. And I wish I could say I think we're going to meet this international goal. I think we could, but it has been a very hard journey for us to branch out just into the Middle East. Ironically, the internet connections are not the problems. Right. It's some of the traditional processes that we still haven't totally solved. So for example, physical textbooks are still required in a lot of classes and ebooks aren't available. Well, you have to physically deliver a book to a very remote part of the world. That is very hard to do. We've actually found we have better luck using Amazon over top of our local bookstore, partly because of their distribution mechanisms. So the deliveries will get books caught up in customs using the traditional methodologies that are at the campuses. But then the thing we're really trying to go for is open education resources and how you start to build that content and find that content to where it doesn't require the physical textbook. That's just one challenge for that. I didn't have a slide, sorry. Be able to pursue a degree. We talked about ASU Online. One thing that we really promote is this is the same faculty who are teaching the campus students. So you will have faculty who are doing research, are experts in their field. We do not necessarily bring in faculty only for online. And I do know other schools have that model. So for example, I used to work at Northern Arizona University. In their extended education program, their extended campus hires their own faculty. They don't use the faculty embedded in the academic units. We do. So that's how we have some really high-ranking programs is the virtual level of the faculty. More members. I think one thing that has led to our growth is the number of programs. We actually are at 178 programs now. Next year, I think we will pass 200. And people want more programs. We're finding new ways to deliver things. Faculty have become more involved and they like it. So we go after it. So there's a list of programs. I'm not going to go over that too much. Coaches are a big way we serve students. I don't want to talk about that too much, but one area before we get to open scale is you specifically mentioned some of our marketing and what we've done. We have a partner of Pearson who actually does a lot of our digital marketing in different spaces. They do a lot of market research to see where areas might be in need of online education. I'm surprised we have as much as you're saying. We don't have a ton of enrollment from the Northeast. There's a lot of colleges and a lot of opportunity up there. But we do have our top 5 states, obviously California, Texas, Colorado, Washington, and Florida are top states that we bring in students. And Florida is partly, it's kind of amazing because they have UF, which has online programs. But I think it's our portfolio of programs. We aren't just offering the traditional online bachelor's degree, nursing and everything. The ones that really do outperform are the psychologies, some of the arts and sciences. We just figured out how to put biochemistry online too. And so we send kits and labs to students' homes, as well as the virtual labs to make it up for that. But in some cases, we haven't totally cracked how to do semi-risky experiments at home. So we did just launch one set of labs where students come to the Valley for 2 weeks in the summer to do an intense set of labs instead of doing labs while they're in the lecture courses. The students absolutely loved it because they had all the content, all the context, they had seen it all on video and everything else, and then they were able to come and just completely immerse themselves in the labs. It was so popular, the college is actually thinking of changing how they operate lab work going forward. And so, for example, you would do all of your lecture and content stuff for the first maybe 10 weeks of a semester, and then you would move to lab work. So it was a very interesting experiment, but we do continue to push the bounds on what can be done online. We were the first ABET accredited EE electrical engineering degree online in the bachelor space. So because you mentioned OpenScale, GFA, which it started as, which was an opportunity for us through edX, with the idea that people out there might just want college credit or to be able to experiment in a college level class, but they don't want all the commitment. And so the idea started as, here, come take this class. If you pay a little bit of money for ID Verify, and then you're successful, then you could pay for credit. So it's it's a try before you buy. And only when you're successful, you pay. So obviously, it's not eligible for any federal financial aid from the government, but it's also at a pretty reduced price. Well, long before we kind of realized, well, we're building like 18 to 24 lower division classes. And then in our online environment, what we discovered is we're turning so many students away because they're not quite eligible for ASU, or they might need just a little more prep work. So we created Pathway to Admission, also known as Earned Admission. We basically tell students, if you get a certain GPA in 4 or 8 classes, and that 4 or 8 is because we have policy in Arizona on admission criteria for students under 24 versus over 24. And then you achieve a certain GPA, we will actually guarantee you admission into the university. We just launched this about 15 or 18 months ago, and what we're discovering is so far students are actually more successful by doing this that way. And I had a little guy in it. So this is sort of our belief at ASU. As an 18-year-old, you can make mistakes, you can mess up. Like, your brain is not fully formed. Most of us who have had teenagers or kids can start to appreciate this more. And so what we say, and you'll hear it from President Crow, is not that the student failed, but that we failed them, that the system failed them, and they need an opportunity to start over. Now, in the past, especially in online, we can say, go to the local community college, and when you think you're ready, then come back and reapply. But by doing this, we kind of can keep an eye on them and help them through the process. But they also don't risk spending a lot of money and not passing. So it's been really, really successful. We've had just over a couple hundred students. And here's the video is not working because this is the PDF. And Tom can speak to this more. This is the kind of thing that Action Lab does, basically proving that this concept works. And so far what we're seeing, and we have, I think 135 students now have been admitted through this pathway. They actually are averaging a higher GPA than someone who comes through from a standard admission criteria. So that is GFA, and that is how it's continuing to grow. And we want to start calling it learn and earn credit. We have an identity crisis of what to call this thing. If you have any ideas, work with them. So those were the big things that I wanted to cover. I think I answered most of your questions, but please, what other questions do you have? And then I'll hand it over to Tom for some of the Action Lab stuff.
I think we're okay here at the Luzerne site. Butler or anybody online, do you have any questions?
This is Kelly again. I guess one of the conversations I was having with someone about this was, you know, and it sounds like it's much different than one of your, like a MOOC. You know, there's always the concern about how do you guarantee that the student is the student that took the class, but it sounds like yours is much more structured, where you do that up front, so you don't have to worry about that on the back end. Is that correct?
Correct. There's actually a company called ID Verify The student has to prove their identity through a video camera and everything, and it's validated by the company.
Thank you.
Now, you can take it as a MOOC, right? You can enroll it. You could go take our intro to astronomy today and never verify who you are and just go through the content. But we won't give you credit for it because we haven't verified that it's you who did the work.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just looking over your questions, and you had one more question that I'm not sure. What benefits do out-of-state students bring to the online classroom? What we hear all the time from our online students, and I will tell you, we only have 22% of our online enrollment is actually in Arizona. So 78% is from another state, or very few from another country. And the students are always talking about how they love that they're interacting with people from all over the country and getting so many different perspectives. A lot of them appreciate that they actually get more attention in an online classroom. So if you're an introvert and you're sitting in a traditional classroom, oftentimes you won't have the same opportunity to engage because the extroverts are maybe dominating the classroom in one way or another. Online is a total equal environment because it's through discussion boards and everything else. So just the diversity of the classrooms, their ability to connect to one another. We also offer them a platform that we call Pitch, which is just for them to build groups on the side. So you have your classroom chats, but then you can have some more social side conversations. But we find because the average online student is about 29 years old, they actually create professional groups to chat with one another in. So there will be an engineering group sponsored by the engineering college where they can chat more informally with one another and keep those connections outside of the classroom going. So that was one I forgot to answer. Should
Okay.
we go? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Alex again. So I actually found that I'm not the one who posed that question, but with my second master's degree, while living in New Jersey, I went to California State University online in Hayward, and my doctoral studies were at Northeastern University in Boston, and I actually made some trips up for residencies in Boston, but people underestimate the value of taking classes with people all around the country, because now I know and have better perspective about school districts and how just things operate in other states and stuff like that. So I think it's a wonderful cultural learning experience, especially when the students are able to learn from 78% of people outside of their areas, to see how policies and procedures are kind of, played out. So I think that would be an awesome marketing tool actually for any organization or any institution that can promote that. So I found a lot of deep value, and I still stay in touch with some of the buddies I met in the Boston area and California and stuff like that.
Yeah, I still connect. I got my master's online a long time ago, and I still stay connected with some people. But I think the other thing people underestimate though is the rigor associated with online education. Some people think it's the easy way out. But the self-discipline you have to be successful. And in our bachelor's areas, the biggest thing we teach students is time management and how to structure themselves to be successful in online, because you don't have a class schedule of which time you go and listen to a lecture. So you have to be much more regimented.
I had a question. How do you handle advising students, this many students? How did you scale your advising to make sure, they were taking the right classes at the right time?
So we have a couple things. ASU built a tool called eAdvisor that maps out what courses you should take when based on your major, which helps scale so students don't have to guess at it. And then each academic unit is supposed to have so many advisors per students that they have to help continue to maintain. And then we also pair the advisors with the coaches. So the advisors are there for purely the academic stuff, such as the class schedule, although again, the tool takes a majority of that, but it helps them understand from a professional perspective where this major is going to take them, and again, that connection to the academic unit. And then the success coaches are there, the ones who actually teach the students what resources they have to help them be successful. They're the ones who help give them a time management study and create a way in which they're going to get their coursework done. They point them to tutoring when needed. We track when you're in a high-risk class, and make sure we're giving you resources at the right time in those classes. So we have sort of a multi-pronged approach of surrounding the student with support, not just the academic advising unit. And ASU also, we do professional advising, not faculty advising, which I know some colleges do.
We have a mix.
Okay, Tom, do you want to use this presentation or you want me to, there's another one up here for you.
Yeah, let's just flick over to.
How many coaches?
Oh, quick question. How many coaches do you have to serve your online population?
I just got 80.
80.
Wow. And full-time, part-time, mix of both?
All of them are full-time professional coaches. Well, so we serve 38,000 students, so 80.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Tom, here's the little bag.
I will take that. And Lisa, did you want to go through some stuff on your deck?
We have time left over, but it's time for you because I've already talked about Starbucks. So
Great. Well, let me take you through some of the things that Action Lab has done. I'll move through some of the abstract stuff at front quickly and get into some of the details, give you a few examples, and then some idea of our current work that we're doing, and try to make sure that we've got a little bit of time for Starbucks deck at the end as well. And let's see, how do I advance on this? Scroll it. Great. Thank you. So you saw the Ed Plus mission. You saw this is Action Lab sitting down in the corner, at least one of the components, one of the players to do the deep learning analytics. We're a dedicated teaching and learning laboratory within Ed Plus. Our goal is to do deep research in digital teaching and learning in a way that supports programs like the Starbucks program, the overall programs that Leah runs, and operationalizes, providing continuous improvement and ultimately resulting in student success. Actionability, insight, innovation. I guess what I'll say on this is we are a lab full of traditional PhDs. We come from disciplinary backgrounds across the cognitive and learning sciences, as well as more traditional learning research areas, but the goal is on innovation and actionability. So making sure that we've got research that not only is interesting, giving insight into what's the causal factors that are going on, but things that can actually move a needle in an important way. Research tracks include ASU Online and our open scale courses, and the little pathway that you see between there is what Leah mentioned, earned admissions or pathways in the Starbucks world. That's moving from, say, Global Freshman Academy, getting students over into higher education, more traditional higher education. Cross-cutting tracks of research or specializations that we have include adaptive, a real interest in adaptive learning. I think that's the kind of the self-driving car of today. Can we get a program that personalizes it, a course that personalizes itself to the student and moves them through with minimal instructor oversight, and then also a movement into sociocultural, metacognitive, social emotional, what's sometimes called non-cognitive. A couple of specific studies that we've been involved in. I know you asked about our research on online learning efficacy. So our first big study was on whether there are meaningful online gaps in undergraduate student success relative to face-to-face programs. The overall strategy here was just to take the largest number of our most highly enrolled courses, both in face-to-face and online, and to do some fairly traditional logistic regressions on those, looking at course completion. So it's important to note that the ASU online space is not a MOOC space. People often get those confused and assume that since we're online, we'll have very low completion rates. We wanted some data to actually be able to put behind that. And then also looking at for students that did complete, what's the passing rate? And for students that didn't pass, what's the B or better mastery rate in those courses? Primary comparison here was between face-to-face and online within each course. And secondarily, and I'll show you some follow-up studies for gender and ethnicity and other sort of heterogeneous effects across student demographics. 70 academic disciplines across 252 courses. On that previous slide, about 160,000 students, about 1 million student course observations. So some really nice statistical power. Nice representation across the field of the academy. These are the results, roll-up results for our on-campus. And the red arrows there, so a high 90% completion for students that did complete, high 90% passing, and about a 70% for those students that did pass, about a 70% mastery rate, D or better. And we add in the online data there. We can see that those gaps are really very small. In the case of mastery, the gap is non-significant. In the other two cases, the gaps are significant, but really small compared to gaps that we've seen in previous literature, which even in the last 5 or 10 years have been in the 15% range. We can look at those across courses. What you're seeing here are bubble plots that show completion, passing, and mastery rates for each of the 252 courses, comparing online versus face-to-face. To the extent that these things are comparable, they're distributed across that dashed line on the main diagonal, and to the extent that we're doing very well in each of these categories, it's going to be pushed up into the upper right quadrant. We can disaggregate by different student characteristics, as I said, or by different course characteristics. So here I've overlaid all of the 61 STEM courses that are in there, and you can see that those cluster in about the same way. In fact, there was no way that we could pull our courses apart and cluster them to find anything that did much better online than the others or much worse online than the others. So we seem to be having about the same success rate, a very reasonable success rate across the different course areas. This took us into a question that's a burning one out there in online education right now, and that is whether online education hurts most those students who are already disadvantaged. So the research question here, do online undergraduate programs disadvantage certain groups? And we focused in particular on this study in gender and ethnicity equity in online programs. I won't walk through the details of this graph other than to say what this shows is the imbalance between the online and the on-campus populations that we need to do our comparison across here. I think those are blue dots. Light blue dots show an unbalanced, just raw difference between the groups. And the way to read this plot is if the two groups are balanced on all of those variables on the left, things like units per term, so whether a student is part-time or full-time, the age of admittance, whether they're a transfer student, gender, and so on. If they're balanced, those dots will be over at the left. If they're unbalanced, they're going to be farther out to the right. And the x-axis here is a number of standard deviations difference. And yes, there is a 200 standard deviation difference between the two groups on units per term, which we also know is a huge impact on the success. So in order to do a good job on this analysis, we've got to do some modeling that allows us to balance that. We use something called AIPW, augmented inverse probability weighting, to balance that. And what those red dots show are that we're able to achieve very good balance on all of these characteristics so that we can get a good causal estimate. That causal estimate would look like this if we were looking at the raw data, suggesting, for example, that Black male students in the negative range over here are doing worse online than on campus, and that all female students are doing worse online on campus. In particular, the like Asian and Black students. Now that's the raw data where things are highly confounded by those other variables. If we look at the inverse probability weighted adjusted that you see in the red here, and this is a much more accurate causal estimate of how the online modality is affecting these different student groups. And what you can see here is that each of the groups is doing at least as well online as they are in face-to-face. That doesn't mean that all of these groups are doing equally well. We know, for example, that Black and Hispanic students have a disadvantage overall, and I'm not showing you those data here. This is just showing you the gap between online and face-to-face. By the way, do stop me at any point if you've got a question or comment on this. We did the same thing for graduation rates, wanting to make sure that we weren't just filtering out students who were having a hard time and getting rid of them before we collected their GPAs. And what we see is that when we do the same sort of causal modeling, this quasi-experimental method, we see the same sort of thing. That is, all of these numbers are positive, suggesting that each of these groups are doing at least as well online in terms of graduation rates as they are on campus. I'll take you very quickly through this one. This is that was a very broad overview over a few 100,000 students. This is over just 12,000 students that were involved in an adaptive learning experiment in college algebra. A really nice sample, lots of financial need, lots of underrepresented minorities, 50-50 male and female. Our research question was whether or not the introduction of an adaptive tutoring core into this college algebra course improved course grade, and the answer was yes, it really did. In the years 2014 and 2015, this is traditional, non-adaptive, including both online and on campus. And what we see is that the lower performing students do worse than the higher performing students. The performance here is really the math ability based on a pre-test, placement test. So no surprise there. You can see that those performances are hovering right around a C, 2.0. We get about a half grade point increase in the first year after introducing ALEX, the adaptive tutoring engine, and then interestingly, another half grade point increase the following year, which we think is due to faculty being more comfortable and being able to use the tool a little bit better. We also looked at heterogeneous effects. The main reason for doing this, because we were very concerned that students coming from non-traditional backgrounds were going to be seeing smaller or no gains. That wasn't the case. Although females show a slightly lower gain than males, underrepresented minorities slightly smaller than over. Low socioeconomic, slightly less than high socioeconomic. In each case, everyone is showing a pretty substantial treatment effect. The one place that I think we do want to keep an eye on is the female students who are either underrepresented minority or Pell eligible. These are the ones I've flagged in red. Those treatment effects are significantly smaller. They're still large, but significantly smaller than majority or advantaged populations. So this opens up the possibility of instantiating gaps where there was no gap before. I'm going to skip through these. We did look at downstream. These students are doing equally well in calculus after finishing up that class, and these students are more likely to engage in a STEM major at some point during their career. I think I'm going to go ahead and, unless you have questions based on your previous looking over this deck, I'm going to go ahead and just skip to the end and let Lisa take over. A little bit on learning analytics here and a little bit on some of our non-cognitive interests, but I think I'll wrap it up there and take any questions and turn it over to Lisa.
Now, I just have one comment. It was good to see the information on Alex because we just went with Alex for several classes this semester. So seeing some data that shows a definite improvement is good to see.
Good. And you're using Alex for college algebra?
I think they're starting with the pre-algebra.
Great. Yeah, I think what we've seen with Alex is that it's very good at what it's good at. Where there's a high amount of structure, and their algorithm is based on the inherent structure in the discipline. So algebra, great. Calculus, not so much so. Where they have really honed their skills, I think our data here, and we're now partnering with McGraw-Hill, Essa and his team to look at this more broadly, but our data is consistent with the data that they're finding in community colleges as well.
Sure. And the observation that it takes that semester or so for faculty to adjust, I think that's very valuable too. Because we have a tendency to want to look right away and say, is this working? And so looking at a little bit further out, waiting for that bigger return. Good to know.
Yeah, and I think our faculty and Dale Johnson here, who's our adaptive specialist at Ed Plus, both have a lot of really good insights about what led to the success of this. This is kind of a black box analysis that we did, just showing that the way that we implemented it really did work. What Dale and the math faculty, I think, could provide is something along the lines of why that worked, including looking at it right away, but also looking at it as that effect grows over the years.
Thank you.
Great. Let me switch over to Starbucks deck and hand the mouse over.
And I'm sorry, I actually have to step out to get to my 11, but since Lisa doesn't have to fly anywhere, so I'm going to close you out. And any other questions you have, feel free to email any one of us. We are chatting all the time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to do a quick time check as well. Do you all have a few more minutes, or do we need to think about wrapping things up? I just want to make sure we take care of any.
Stay.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, we're expected to be here for another 10 minutes. So, I mean, if you have the time, I think we're okay. Butler and everybody else online, are you okay for a few more minutes?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah, we're fine.
All right.
So I pretty much gave you a lot of the details as it relates to Starbucks, but I thought one thing that would be interesting is if I show you, you've seen now ASU's charter, which is on the right. And on the left is Starbucks mission and values. And I won't ask you to read all of that, but I think if we reflect back on why the partnership and this program has worked so well between ASU and Starbucks, is you see a lot of commonalities in just the core of both entities of who we are, and we're based on inclusivity and empowering people to better their communities. And that's something that Starbucks is grounded in. It's also something that ASU is grounded in. So I get asked the question a lot, if another company wanted to do this, how could we go about doing this? And I always say, you have to make sure you have some of these core principles in place, because it can get difficult. There are challenges that come with this. And at the end of the day, we both have these core beliefs that an education empowers not only people, but the communities that they live in. And so that's why we continue to move this thing forward with Starbucks in such a way that's really a first of its kind partnership. So I just thought this is a really impactful slide just because of the commonality between both of our entities. And then I talked through with you about sort of the inception of the program, as well as some of the iterations that we have. Also wanted to call out that we offer the benefit to veterans. They can also pass it on to their spouses or their children. So that's another benefit that we offer as part of the partnership as well. And then you see that bullet point on the pathway to admission. That's the the expansion that we did last year that Leah was talking about of the ability to take the courses and transfer them into credits to earn the admission into ASU. And I mentioned earlier, I think all told, we have about 130 some people that have been admitted to ASU. Over 100 of those are actually SCAP scholars. So this pathway to admission project that we launched has been really successful with our Starbucks population. This picture is also a really great picture. This woman graduated last year. Every year at graduation, Starbucks takes out a full page ad in the New York Times celebrating that, and she happened to be on the her picture there was one of the full page ads this past May. It was really great. And then just some stats. I think I covered many of these. I didn't tell you that our big goal is to graduate 25,000 by 2025. By the end of this year, we'll be 10% there. We are on a trajectory to hit that. Takes a lot of work to do that because obviously it's a focus on getting new enrollments, keeping people in, retaining them. But we do have a trajectory to get there, and obviously that's a shared goal between ASU and Starbucks. Just on, just as a consistent percentage, about 60% of people when they're hired at Starbucks, they are given a little box to check if they're interested in learning more about the SCAP program. So we get an overall interest of about 60% of new hires. Some of them at the end of the day are not eligible. Maybe they already have a bachelor's, but just from an interest perspective, it's over half that show an interest. And we're also starting to see now that sometimes people are, and a higher percentage of people are actually starting to work at Starbucks because they know of the benefit. So of course it was before where they were working there and then the benefit was offered, but now because of the awareness of the program, someone knows if I get a job at Starbucks, this is the benefit that's offered to me. So that's an interesting shift as well. I mentioned the 11,000 partners that are participating in the program. Over 1,900 graduates to date. We're looking for that number to be about 2,500 by the end of the year. The information in the middle is about retention within Starbucks. So they retained about 1.5 times their peers in U.S. retail and are promoted about, this number is actually just came out a couple weeks ago, is now 2.8 times their U.S. retail population. So that means this population of SCAP scholars in general retain longer at Starbucks and have a higher level of promotability. So one of the things that Starbucks is working on is, let's say I'm a barista and I want to stay in the retail segment. Maybe when I finish my bachelor's degree, instead of moving to shift supervisor, I can get a fast track program to become store manager. So they're working on things internally there that help people kind of with that internal promotability factor as well. The other percentage on the right, which is a really, really interesting percentage, is 63% of all stores have a participating scholar. And this is interesting because we know that here references are really powerful, and we find that if a store has a scholar there, we have a higher level of engagement and a higher probability of someone else in the store joining the program if they have a colleague or a peer who's part of the program. We also engage store managers to really work with them to make sure that they support them, help them with their hours, and back to the time management thing to make sure they have a support system in the store that they work as well. Just from a 360 approach of helping them really, really be successful in the program.
I'll ask that question. One question, if you don't mind. So this ASU college benefit, is that available to part-time or full-time Starbucks employees? And is there a waiting period after employment? Like how does that all work?
Yeah, great question. So it's treated basically the same way as their healthcare benefits. So essentially, it's the equivalent of working about 20 hours a week, so they don't have to be a full-time. It's essentially part-time, and I think it's 90 days they start, they are benefits eligible if they are working, you know, a certain amount of hours per week. And then they just have to maintain that level of eligibility. So they just have to hit that, you know, essentially average of 20 hours per week in order to maintain their eligibility.
Thank you.
Well, it's a good balance. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions online or from anybody at Butler?
No, no questions.
Very good. Well, do you have any other questions about ASU online in general before we wrap up? More than happy to take those. If I can't answer them or Tom can't answer them, we can certainly take them as follow-up and make sure we get you whatever information you're looking for.
Yeah, just one wrap up. I'm not sure how much Todd Altadonna shared with you, but basically I work for Delaware County Community College, and we are looking to expand our partnerships. Just a few days ago, one of our sister institutions, Community College of Philadelphia, just signed a transfer degree with Rutgers University. They're only 5 miles apart. However, it was a big deal because it was a Pennsylvania school partnering with an out-of-state school with transfer agreements. Most of our transfer agreements are within the state of Pennsylvania, both state and like private or smaller schools. So we would definitely like to be put in touch with somebody at ASU to develop some sort of transfer agreement. What I'll do with the rest of the group here is just anybody who wants to opt out, I'll just remove their contact information from our list, and then within the next week or two, anybody that's interested in some sort of partnership or some sort of detail, I can just forward you all of our contact information for the community colleges here in the state of Pennsylvania. And unless there's any other questions or anything, we do have your emails. I do want to extend a huge thank you to all four of you, including Todd. Sorry about the time zone mix-up. I swear you guys were only 2 hours behind instead of 3. I think your information, I can't speak for everybody, was very informative and a little bit overwhelming at times. We appreciate everything, and one second, and we're looking forward, to working with you to some capacity, and congratulations to all of your success.
Very good. Well, thank you, and certainly we're happy to work with you. I've taken that the note. You obviously know how to get in touch with all of us. If something comes to mind, we're happy to give you follow-up information as well. And if we would have this meeting next Friday, we would be 2 hours apart. So no worries there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep. So,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Have
Great,
a
thank you.
great Friday.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think this wraps up our meeting. Again, sincerely, big thanks to all of our institutions who were able to participate, and safe travels. And we'll make arrangements. I think Doreen volunteered Hack to be one of the sites for possibly April 26th of next year. And again, safe travels, and thank you for all your time and effort.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.